Here's what they discovered. And it's not in the published work. It's not in the other videos. It's not in that material. But here's the conclusions after all of it. And I met the Northwest field director, got to know him real well over the years, of the Mankind Research Association, the kind of stuff they were doing back in the 70s. And he kept his data. He's got a great box of data talking about all of these experimentations. And what they concluded was that A, extrasensory perceptions, these odd little things that people could do, were real. Not in all instances, but in enough instances to cause them some alarm, military planners. Because what also they discovered is that human beings generally have these innate capabilities that we used to call extrasensory perception. Some have referred to as gifts of the spirit. They come by a lot of different names. But what they are is natural attributes of what human beings are. We're created in the image of a creator. That means more than how we look. It has to do with what we are. And what we are very capable individuals. But in order to reach those higher capabilities, in order to reach those higher states of awareness, in order to actualize your full potential as a human being, you have to be able to slow the mind. You have to be able to create a situation where the mind, if you were to look at it with an EEG and look at the brain activity, you get very coherent, very rhythmic patterns, the kind associated with the emotions of love and empathy and compassion. Same kind of patterns show up. Higher ordered thinking is associated with these coherent patterns, these rhythmic patterns. Fear, flight responses, anger, hate, you get incoherent patterns all over the map at a higher amplitude, at a higher pulse rate that indicate agitation, confusion, the inability to think. What we do know is that in states of fear, worry, and anxiety, you cannot ever reach your higher capacity as a human being. So the easiest mind control technique, keep people in a state of fear and worry and agitation, and we're defeated before the first volley is fired. That's not what we need to be about. You know, when you think about it, when you're walking confidently, consciously doing what you know you're capable of doing, how empowering it is to step into each act that you take on as a human being in a productive and meaningful way, without fear, without worry. It's when your mind falls into what some call that zone that the athlete knows and the artist knows and every one of us knows in those instances where those sparks of creativity come through. That is our normal state of consciousness. If you were to look at it in the lower range of the alpha range where you are in that most creative mindset, you'd be between 7 and 8, 7 and 9 hertz pulses per second. The planet naturally oscillates at 7.83 hertz pulses per second. Isn't that interesting? Correlates perfectly with the ideal state for awake, conscious living when you're awake. And yet the fields that we surround ourselves with in this room right now, in every room where everyone's watching this because the power grid is operating at 60 hertz, 60 pulses per second, an agitating signal all the time in our background noise, if you will, our noise. Because think about it, in a crowded room, all the noise you hear and you're having a conversation with your friend, and you block out all that background noise. We do the same thing with electromagnetic fields. I'll tell you when you notice it. I couldn't use this analogy in Germany. I'll tell you why in a minute. But think about when the power fails in your community. When the power goes out, completely goes out, the power grid's down. Now everybody remembers it given all the winter storm activity. And the first thing you notice how quiet it is because the refrigerator's not humming along, the air conditioner or the heaters aren't blowing air around. The second thing you notice is how your whole body exhales as you relax. Same feeling when you come in from a hard day of work and you're wearing your insulated soles on your shoes, and the first thing you do is you kick them off and you come back into ground with the pulse rate of the planet and you relax. That relaxation is the silence. Do you know what the sound of being born into an explosion is? Silence. We're living in that explosion, in the fields that surround us every moment of every day. When I use that analogy this last year in Stuttgart, everybody looked at me like I was crazy when I said, you know when the power fails. It never fails in Germany. People with gray hair never remember a power failure since World War II ended. You know, I mean, we don't even think about that. I mean, you talk about the contrast in technology. I can't even use the same analogy in Europe because it doesn't make sense because their technology happens to run smoother. And we invented the power grid for all practical purposes. But again, you know, I say it humorously, but at the same time recognizing under all this are these very real effects that we have to recognize. So how do you learn how to control you? You know, people ask me all the time, you know, you talk about a lot of technologies, generate a lot of concern, some levels of anxiety. That's not my intention. My intention is to inform so we can begin to think about this stuff in a productive, constructive way and how we address it. But more importantly, the more important part of this message and anything that I've said in the last couple of days is about the fact that we are more than we think we are. There are no small things. There's only things that are undone. Each thing that we do as individuals matters. It matters a lot, more than you might even realize or recognize. And there are no small things. And what I do versus what you do, it's not a size issue. It's getting the work done. All of us have a sphere of influence, and we need to assert ourselves in that sphere of influence. What that means is it might mean that we have a conversation with our family or our close friends. We don't feel any anxiety having done that. When the anxiety creeps in, back off. Think about what you're doing. It should be like breathing if you're working outside of fear and outside of worry, and you're working in a way that is possible, where you acknowledge it's possible. Do what you know you can do to further your version and your view of the truth, and do it in a respectful way, and do it with confidence. And don't lift the burden if it's too heavy. There's someone else that'll lift it for you, or lift it with you. But do something in favor of what you believe to be right and true, whether it's on any of the issues we've covered today or on some other issue, but something that you care about and recognize there's a billion other people doing the same thing, and we're not waiting for an organization to form. We're already standing in it. It's called the human race. Participate in it. Be what you were created to be, and assert yourself in the world today by affecting change, by direct action, in a respectful and rational way, and without fear and without worry, because that is the zone in which things can happen. Fear is the adversary. It has always been the adversary, and it's the easiest method of controlling human behavior.